Good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so I think we should get our meeting started. George Torres indicated he's not available, so all the remaining board members I see are present. So I'm going to go and start with the right to know script for this evening. So today we'll be conducting a school board meeting of the Souhegan School Board. Before we get started, I read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chairperson of the Souhegan School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to executive order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order and confirming that, one, we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom and via phone by following the directions and the links provided on our website, www.sau39.org. Two, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. Three, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email awallace@sau39, that's AWALLACE @sau39.org. Number four, in the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Number five, please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. And number six, finally, let's get started by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So we'll call the roll. And I'll start with Steve.
Steve, I am home, and for the next 3 minutes, my wife is in the room with me, and then she will disappear.
Okay, thanks. Stephanie.
I am at home and alone.
John.
I am at home and alone.
Laura.
Home and alone.
All right, thanks. I think that's everybody. All right. Reviewing the call to order, the agenda. So meeting is called to order. I would like to, this is not on the agenda, but I would like to just take a quick moment of silence for Dave Bellamy, who was part of the SAU staff for quite a number of years in both the high school as well as the middle school, and perhaps even I think the village school. So just a quick moment of silence for him and his untimely passing a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for that. Okay, we do have a public input, number one of two. And I'd like to remind anybody who would like to address the board to please do so using the raise your hand feature. Again, stating name, address, and town in which you reside. And making whatever comments you would like to make. Let's see if there's.
You have a hand.
Oh, there we go. I knew there you go, Lisa. I knew she was going to raise her hand, so I was looking for it. Lisa, please, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. I was just wanted to make an announcement about project graduation.
Can you still state your name and address?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Town?
Oh, yeah. Lisa Eastline, 19 River Road, Amherst. I just want to I'm on the project graduation committee from the Souhegan High School PTSA committee. I just want to make a brief announcement about what the plan is and what we have going on. So project graduation is going to look different this year, but at least we're going to be able to do something. And it is going to be held the night of graduation on the turf field, beginning at 9:30 p.m. We're going to have music, activities, food. We have our hypnotist back, which is always a big hit. And this year we're going to end it all off with a fireworks show at midnight. We are charging the students a little less than normal at $15 a student, but we have scholarships available. And those students, our families can reach out to Shilu at the high school to let us know. Confidentiality rules apply. To help fund this event, we are selling the senior signs that you may have seen around last year in other towns that say, you know, congratulations and a kid's name, or just seniors, or whatever people want to say, because it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be a friend. It could be a community member, anybody who just wants to show support for the graduating class of 2021. So the advertisement for that is gonna be on Facebook, the Souhegan Parent Newsletter, and hopefully in the digital Amherst Citizen coming up soon. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a quick question. Do you have
Sure.
any contingency for bad weather?
So for now, we are covered for the 4th and the 5th. Not 100% certain. The hypnotist was going to let us know about the 6th. So we have 3 days where we could move what we want to do.
Great. That's awesome. Good job getting that organized.
So, one last thing I forgot, Pim. If anybody wants to donate to help us out, you can go to the Souhegan PTSA website, and there's a donate button. That would be awesome.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Lisa. Anybody else have a question for her? If not, no? Okay, seeing no hands, so I guess we're all set. Are there any other members of the public wishing to address the board at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on. Before we get to the next thing, I do want to, we always seem to miss the point where we talk quickly about any committee updates. So I would just like to ask any of the board members if they have a committee update that they'd like to mention. If not, it's okay. Oh, Steve is waving at me. Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
So PPC is going to meet again on Thursday. And it's again about very fine detailed questions about the change in start time and the impact on very specific job functions within the school that they didn't know the answers to and are curious about, and the people who are affected are curious about. So I think I know Adam confirmed he was going to be there. And there was some talk about inviting Mike. I don't know if that happened or not, if he's coming or not, but that's between Mike and Andy. We'll find out on Thursday. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any other board members have any updates they'd like to mention? No? Okay, how about Delane? Do you have a community council update you'd like to provide?
Yeah, thank you. So at Souhegan, we have 2 appeal boards called the Community Review Board and the Judiciary Board, where students have the opportunity to appeal to those boards after they've received a consequence from the administration. And so this past meeting, we passed a proposal that would require their Miranda rights, which would just be telling them about the options that they have to appeal to those boards by either the dean of students or whoever is giving them this consequence before it actually occurs. That way they all are aware of their options, and that just ensures that each student has the right opportunities when they're receiving a consequence. Yeah. From us, and then also from a student standpoint in the building, I thought that it'd be nice to just give you guys a little update. So next week is Fang Fest, and there are so many safety precautions that are put in place, and it's really being organized in a really good way. And then since this past segment or 2 segments ago, we've had an increase of students and staff in the building. I personally think that it's super refreshing seeing like so many different people that I haven't seen other than on a screen in over a year, and just like seeing them in person. And then also, I know for me, all 5 of my teachers are in person, so it's really good to have those connections with them again as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Delaney. Does anybody have any questions for Delaney at this point? No. All right, great. Well, I appreciate that, Delaney. Thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay and hang on and watch as long as you like. Okay, so let's move right over to our board seat appointment. As we all know, Amy Facey resigned her seat right before our last meeting. Or no, sorry, right after our last meeting, right before the SAU meeting. And so now we have 5, I believe, letters of interest that we received, and it is up to the Amherst members of this Souhegan Cooperative School Board to decide which of those will take Amy's seat for the duration of this year, I guess, right, until the next March election. So I think when we did this for Dave, we kind of gave everybody a few minutes to talk about what are the candidates, and then I think we did a top 2 type of voting, and then narrowed it down from there. So I will open the floor, and please do your virtual raise your hand so we can make sure we get everybody who wants to talk. Okay, Stephanie, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So reading through the letters, to me, there's one candidate that stands out a bit, most likely because she addressed a lot of things that we're seeing that's important at the school. Talking about independent, individual education plans. She understands competency-based education. She understands transcripts, making things unique for each student. So I kind of look at Christine Peters as being a strong candidate for this position.
Thank you. John?
Yes, I also read all the letters, and I really appreciate people putting the letters in. It's a really good sign of a healthy community that there's multiple people interested. I thought one person stood out as well, like Stephanie, that Christine Peters has lived. She has basically lived our strategic vision, and she brings that experience at a time when we're trying to make progress implementing that with respect to individualized learning and competency-based mastery skills, grading and reporting, and interpreting and translating transcripts, and a whole lot of pieces and components of that we're right in the middle of trying to implement at the school-wide level. And so that's very exciting. It's not a knock on any other candidate or any other person, but that really stood out to me as quite an obvious choice.
Thank you, John. Laura, yes, go ahead.
I wanted to say, I thought Christine's, she had quite a lengthy letter, and it was full of many of the issues that she could immediately contribute to our board conversations. And I liked her as a candidate as well. I appreciate everyone expressing interest.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Steve, anything you'd like to add, or otherwise?
I can't unmute. Yeah, no, I've been in on this one. I'm in listening mode. I just have been interested to hear what my fellow board members have to say.
Okay, well, I hear three very like-minded opinions at this point. So it sounds like Christine Peters is definitely the front runner. If there, I guess we can probably just take it to a vote at this point and see. So why don't we just go ahead and do that? And then unless somebody else has something that they want to add, I'll give you a couple seconds to say yes, no. Doesn't look like it. All right, so let's just go ahead and do a roll call vote. This time I'll start with Laura.
Make a motion first
Oh,
to
yes.
accept Christine Peters and nominate her to replace Amy Facey's board seat.
Okay,
Second the motion.
okay, perfect. So now that we have the motion on the floor, we can vote on the motion. So again, I'll start with Laura.
Taylor, yes.
Stephanie,
Grund, yes.
John,
Glover, yes.
and Steve.
Yes,
Okay. So the motion passes and Christine Peters will take the seat that was vacated by Amy Facey for the duration of the current voting period, I guess. I'm not sure how else to describe it until the next March. All right. And so typically it is there is a, I'm looking for my notes from earlier, so I apologize for a second. Sorry, as I run through this.
Hey, Pam, I see
Yes, Sean.
I see Christine is in our attendees. Is it? I know she needs to be formally sworn in before she can vote, but it would make sense to hear what she has to say on the rest of the agenda items, or at least have an opportunity to ask a question.
Yeah.
The way
So,
right now, even though
yeah.
she wouldn't be able to vote on any of the decisions to be made.
So I did consult with our superintendent, who consulted with our attorney. And there is a way that we can certainly do get her sworn in at this point, so she can be part of the discussions, because typically the requirement is that the business meeting has to conclude before any newly elected officers can assume the office, but it's been waived during these emergency order COVID times. And so I'm kind of reading through it a little bit at this moment. So Adam, please feel free to jump in if I'm misstating anything.
No, you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. She's able to take the oath remotely. The issue is someone who can take that oath. It would need to be the clerk, a selectman. I'm not sure if another school board member is able to take the oath, or a justice of the peace. And I'm no longer a JP, so I cannot do it.
I can do it. Moderators have the power.
Awesome.
Oh, there you go.
I have to find the oath though. There'll be a brief delay while I scramble.
I have it already ready to go.
Oh, all right. Then you can say the words and she can repeat them, and I'll say, yes, it happened.
How about I share them on the screen and she could read them? How about that?
That's even better.
All right.
Perfect. Christine, are you still available?
Yes, I just,
Oh, there you
I
are.
was not in a place that was free of other people. And so I have moved and I'm trying to set myself up in that sort of place. I didn't expect you all to move along so quickly. So I'm trying to see the child's bedroom here. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Take your time.
Okay. Whenever you are ready.
Okay, Steve, I'll let you coordinate with Christine.
Okay, Christine, if you would just read the first paragraph and then the second paragraph, inserting your name in the appropriate spot in each place, and then I will be the person you swore in front of.
Okay. I, Christine Peters of Amherst, New Hampshire, do solemnly swear that I will bear faith and true allegiance to the United States of America and the state of New Hampshire, and will support the constitutions thereof, so help me God. I, Christine Peters, do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent on me as a school board member of the Souhegan Cooperative District, according to the best of my abilities, agreeably to the rules and regulations of the Constitution and the laws of the state of New Hampshire. So help me God.
Congratulations, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Christine. And it's great to fill out the board so quickly. So, and again, thank you to all of the other folks who submitted letters of interest. As the other folks have said, it's great when we have more than just a couple of interested parties. So thank you all again. All right. One of the other things also that we want to do before we jump into the consent agenda, as I mentioned in an email last month, that we need to have an interim vice chair, somebody take Amy's vice chair position until the upcoming election in June. Do I have anybody who is interested in that?
I would nominate Stephanie Grund.
Okay,
I'll second.
second that. Okay. It's funny, I'm perfectly fine with it, but then somebody will have to nominate somebody else to take over as the secretary.
Secretary.
So, yeah. So, anybody else? Seeing none, let's move ahead with a roll call vote. So I'll start with Laura.
Taylor, yes.
John,
Glover, yes.
Christine. You know that you're a voting member. You have to come off of mute though.
Peters, yes.
Okay, great. Stephanie.
Grund, yes. It sounds stupid. Skip it.
Yeah. All right, Steve
Yes,
and Gronster, yes. All right, so welcome into the vice chair seat. Now we need an interim secretary. Do I have a volunteer, or do you have actually somebody? Would somebody like to nominate somebody for that?
I've been that position before. I'd be happy to fill it till our next.
I was going to say I'll nominate John.
Okay, perfect. I'll second the nomination. Okay, let's do a roll call vote on that. So Laura.
Taylor, yes.
Stephanie.
Grund, yes.
Christine.
Peters, yes.
Steve.
yes.
John.
Yes.
And Gronster, yes. All right, so thank you to John and Stephanie for stepping up. And one more role that we need, again, have to, I guess we don't have to, but it'd probably be nice to fill during this interim period, which is a community council rep. Do I have any interested parties that would like to take on that?
I'll nominate Laura Taylor.
Okay, perfect. I'll second that. Anybody else? Going good? Okay, let's go through a roll call vote. I'll go the opposite direction. Steve,
Yes,
John,
Glover, yes.
Christine,
Peters, yes.
Stephanie,
Grund, yes.
Laura,
Taylor, yes.
and Gronster, yes. Okay, perfect. So we've got those taken care of. Thank you all very much for volunteering. And Delaney, if you can just make sure that Laura is included on all community council communications, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody, can I entertain a motion
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, before we go on and vote for approval or not, I see Laura has her hand up. Do you have some items you'd like to pull from the consent agenda, Laura?
Yes, I have the minutes. I thought we should pull the unassigned fund balance number 2 and number 8 are both associated with the same item because we're discussing it later. I wanted to pull the principal's report, possibly
Okay, what-
some Title I program number 7.
6, 7. Yeah, so I have no issue with, obviously, with the unassigned fund balance because we are discussing that later.
That was 2 and 8 were both
Yeah,
affiliated with that.
okay. Sorry, Steve. Well, Stephanie had her hand up. Hold on, Steve, Stephanie.
No,
You're
same thing.
covered?
2, 6, 7, and 8. I'm good. Yeah, I want pulled.
Okay, Steve?
Just so a point of order, so reports to the board from other people, unless we're going to discuss them, there's really no point in pulling them. They're statements of fact, whether they're in the consent agenda or not. So I just going forward, unless we really need to discuss something, I would suggest is we don't need to pull them. So the UFB, it's on the agenda later. There's no harm in having the consent agenda because it's the facts that are the basis for the discussion. Title I, if we want to discuss it, that's more appropriate to pull if it needs to be discussed. Just,
Thanks, good.
just the way
Yeah.
that it should work.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah, maybe could we just talk about that a little bit quickly? I had the similar question in my mind that over the last recent months, it seems that more items have come into the consent agenda that used to be outside the consent agenda for discussion purposes, like the principal's report was a great example, where it's a document where everyone generally is going to have a question or two. Oh, what about this? Or what's the status of that? And now a lot of these things are getting packed into the consent agenda. So what is the proper vehicle to discuss that? Would be to pull them, is that right? Or was it be just to say, I don't know, what's the good, efficient way to be able to discuss items in there?
It's a great question. I'm going to ask our parliamentarian, Mr. Coughlin, if he's got an opinion on that, and then I'll also ask Adam as well.
I have an opinion. I don't know if it'll match Adam's opinion.
Okay.
Things that are likely to generate questions, discussion, probably shouldn't be put in the consent agenda. So it's a safe bet that the principal's report isn't going to be just pass uncommented on. So I would not put it in the consent agenda.
Okay. That makes sense. Is that typically what
Of course,
the
on
consent
the
agenda-
minutes, we dream of the day the minutes will pass without being corrected. Hasn't happened yet.
No, that's okay, because typically they're just quick clarifications. But I understand what you're saying, and I think I'm agreeable to that. Adam, is that something that we can do moving forward? Just anything that's got some kind of a discussion around it, or likely to have a discussion around it, to have a separate topic? I know it may end up elongating the overall agenda, but yeah, that's fine with me. Sometimes
Yeah, I
a
think
quick discussion, sometimes I'm not.
I think that makes sense. To Steve's point, things like the unassigned fund balance report, despite however long the board discusses it, the report will still stand as it is. So those types of things I think make sense in the consent agenda, especially because we can receive questions ahead of time from board members and hopefully answer them. And so I think those things make sense, but if there's going to be discussion about the principal's report or any other topic, that's fine. The general idea of a consent agenda is it's somewhat of a judgment call about things that are not likely to create much discussion. And some boards, some things go without discussion and others they don't. And so it's partially getting to know our boards a little bit as well.
Okay. Oh, good. Thanks for both of you, to both of you for your explanation. So moving forward, I think it'd be a good idea to have the principal's report as a separate topic. And then, yeah, these other ones could go either way depending on, again, if there's going to be discussion around it, and we can do those on a case by case basis. So let's move you have some quick, I guess, not comments, but changes for the minutes, Laura?
I have several this time. Number 103, when Mr. Steele makes a comment about providing a report once it's published, and he had said, and it's a different word, produced, which is a totally different meaning. So I'd like to change published to produced because that's what he actually said. And it's more accurate.
Mhm.
The
I'm sorry,
I
I'm
had a-
having a lot of trouble hearing Laura. I
oh,
don't know if it's a microphone thing. Am I the only one who's having difficulty?
I'm hearing her fine.
Okay. I hear everyone else okay.
number 185, there was a small point that I thought was very important and something Mr. Barry said, and that was that the 10th grade experience will be running differently starting in 2021 to 2022 school year, this coming fall. And he said that in the meeting and it didn't make it into the minutes.
So it should be added to that line.
185.
You're asking to be added into that line?
Yes, to add that the 10th grade change starts at 2021 to 2022. I think for parents who might be looking for information,
Yeah,
that might be a significant point for them.
sure. No, I understand. Right now, we're just trying to add in, want to make sure that the changes are being addressed. So we don't want to get into necessarily into discussion on it right now. Any other changes?
Yes, line 243, it says on their graduates, and it should be on our graduates, OUR. Then it says they provide them, and it should be we provide them. It's all in the same line. It's Mr. Steele speaking at line 243.
Okay.
Line 295, Delaney Fox is speaking, and it just said statistics. And I thought, if we have student input, that their statistics should be stated rather than just omitted from the record. And their statistics were specifically that 80% of the students wanted prom, 76% wanted the class trip, and around 50% wanted challenge day.
Okay.
Lastly, line 353, add a line, Ms. Taylor thought a community council, that community council was a committee of the board.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, no problem. I'm assuming that Danae's captured all those. If not, please feel free to Danae to reach out to Laura for any of that wording. Okay, anybody else have changes to the minutes? No, all right. Let me see, 2 was the projected UFB. So again, that's, sorry, we will talk about that shortly. And I think though that the UFB is the projected UFB is what it is. So I don't see a reason to not have it as part of the consent agenda, as Steve mentioned earlier. And then,
Tim?
Yes.
Are we able to ask for clarification on that report though? Just
Yeah, I think that's part of the discussion.
yeah.
Right? You can certainly
Oh,
bring it back
you want
to
to?
that.
So you want to wait until we discuss the projects at the end to go into a couple clarification questions I have on the UFB report?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the number 2, right? The projected UFB is the projected UFB. That's a fact, right? And the same with the report at the end. Now, we certainly can discuss the report we have a whole topic about the unassigned fund balance. So we can talk about all of that, but if there's anything about the report that you don't like, that you think is misleading or anything like that, if not, then I think we should leave it as part of the consent agenda. I can see pulling the principal's report, so we can have a little additional discussion around that. And then the Title I program update, we can pull that and have a quick discussion around that. So if everybody's amenable to that, so all we're really doing is pulling 6 and 7 and amending number 1, and that's it. Is everybody good with that? So I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended, pulling 6 and 7, but with the amended minutes in number 1.
Second.
Second by Laura. Okay. And then we'll go around and do a quick roll call vote. Steve,
Yes.
John,
Glover, yes.
Stephanie,
And yes.
Christine.
I'd like to abstain since I wasn't at the meeting and didn't get to look at the minutes either.
Sure. Yep. That's you're right. And Laura
Taylor, yes.
and Gronstroy, yes. So 5 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 absent. Great. Okay. So let's go through before we get to the next topic. Let's do the items that we pulled. So principal's report. If anybody has a particular comment or question for Mike Berry, our principal, please raise your hand. And I see Laura's hand, so go ahead, Laura. Laura,
I
you're on
wanted to
mute.
make
Oh, there you
another
are.
statement about the minutes. And Adam could probably clarify this. When people try to look for information about our meetings, we have videos, we have minutes, we have agendas. Sometimes the slides are only in the video, or I'm wondering, the agendas, are they kept with the minutes and is that recorded forever? Because the minutes themselves don't really include a lot of the substance of the meeting.
Okay, sorry. There's a question directed to Adam, Laura? Okay, Adam, can you address that?
Yeah, so the requirements of the statutes are that the board keeps minutes of the motions that were made and what the recorded votes were, who was present, et cetera. That's the only statutory requirement. We do, however, keep the videos posted indefinitely so that anybody who wants to understand every single word that was spoken and to see all of the information that was presented, they can certainly do that. And we also keep all of our agenda packets published on our website indefinitely as well. So between all of that, there's several options for people who want information. Those who want to understand just the motions can skim through the minutes and looking for the bolded sections of the minutes. Those who want to see some of the backup materials can get it from our website, and those who want to see absolutely everything can watch the video. It's not often that there's something that's presented during a meeting that's also not part of the packet.
Well, specifically, I was noticing the start times. It was part of a memo that was part of the agenda. And when we voted and discussed it, we never actually included the start times in the minutes.
Okay, so I understand your concerns, Laura. Again, let's we had an opportunity to go through that, or right now we're just trying to look at the principal's report. So if they have any specific questions around the principal's report, let's get to that. I see Stephanie's hand is up.
So Mike, I'm very excited to see that we're getting more dual enrollment courses. That's great. My question is, and I know I've briefly touched on this before when you were around, and I've asked questions in the past. Everything seems to be going through SHNU. And my question is, have we evaluated that SHNU is the right school? How have we chosen these particular programs versus continue things through NCC or look at UNH? Just would like to have a little more understanding behind that.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm going to have to look back, have a conversation with Karen Chininis to determine, how the process works and what dual enrollment programs or courses we use, because there's multiple, right? And so I'll have to get back to you on the exact process we use. I know we offer a variety. I think SHNU is the latest round of people to accept some more courses that we have as dual enrollment courses, but I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that when we have dual enrollment that we see that the classes are actually transferring and helping the students in some way. I know that there are some courses which are not transferring as well when they come from SHNU to other schools. So I just want to understand that process and make sure we're evaluating everything fully. Pim, I have one other question, but I'll wait, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate that, Stephanie. John, you're up next.
Well, I had really one, but now that Stephanie stated hers, so I have two. So I'll just dovetail off of hers to keep them the same. Well, if dual enrollment courses get added as is indicated, could that apply retroactively for students who have previously successfully completed those courses prior to the time when they were approved?
In my experience, no, but I can double check that. Christine, who knows a lot about that stuff, is also nodding no. So Christine.
Yeah. Sorry, another Christine.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I know that was I'm thinking that's going to get confusing. CL and CP, I guess. I was CL in one of my assistant principal jobs. Our principal was also Christine. Like, what are the odds of the principal and the assistant principal both being Christine? For dual enrollment courses, the teacher actually has to be approved as an adjunct professor. So if that course was previously taught, it may or may not have, it didn't have approval at that time. It didn't have, one of our teachers was not an adjunct professor at the time. And it's possible that, that the teacher hadn't met the qualifications at that time to be able to be considered an adjunct professor. The syllabus also has to be approved by the school or university. And then there's also certain grading and reporting timelines and aspects that have to be met for that course grade to actually appear on a transcript. So unfortunately, it cannot be retroactive.
Okay.
Thank you. Laura. We can't hear you, Laura.
My first question is, how will Mike balance the personalized and individualized pathways with heterogeneous groupings? An easy question.
Not that easy, Laura. I think it is going to be something that we have to look into and going to be a journey, right? So you want to, make a commitment to heterogeneous grouping when you can, right? And because you believe in that, and that's something that's is a huge part of the foundation of Souhegan and is appropriate in many cases. And so, but then you also want to have the ability to have a little bit of flexibility for students to, go on their individual path to graduation. So that's something that's going to have to be worked out. And as you kind of decide, how you want to move forward with that, there's going to be a number of people involved in the conversation, from counselors to staff to students, and that process is going to begin, but it's going to take some time to kind of get there a little bit with that, to be able to answer that like very succinctly and concisely in a meeting like this. But I can tell you the journey has started and will continue.
Thanks, Mike. Stephanie, your second question.
Yes, can we get a little clarification about Wednesdays and how it works with the governor's orders? There's been a lot of questions. Have had a lot of people asking me and how, if everyone's supposed to be back in school 5 days a week and we still are doing the personalized learning days Wednesdays, is that going to end or is that going to continue? What's the communication?
Yeah, well, we have a few weeks before we have to make that shift, because next week during Fang Fest, we are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in school with a half a day for students on Friday. Then we're on break, and then when we return, we have to have a plan for Wednesday. The governor did come out with an executive order that we have to sort through, and at this point, we haven't finalized our plan, so I'm hesitant to exactly say what it's going to look like. But we do have to offer 5 days a week, but I think there's a couple ways you can skin that to meet the needs of our students and what they want, to keep the flexibility open for them. So, but soon,
Okay.
like in the next day or two, we're hoping to have some more information on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good question, Stephanie, because obviously that's important. And Mike, once you and Adam have it all figured out, if you could, make sure that you keep the board in communication on that, just from a FYI perspective, that'd be great. Appreciate that. John, you had another question?
Yeah, it's kind of a comment more than a question, I think. But on the 10th grade experience, reframing, and it seems to me like there's a connection maybe between that and 8th graders matriculating into 9th grade, and maybe Mr. Chamberlain, when he comes on board formally, can look at this. But there's nowhere in here. I have not seen it in here when we talk about continued progress towards personalizing the pathway to graduation and student choice, that there's a really missing part that has to do with the students themselves communicating what their academic goals are, or their athletic goals, or their club goals, or their school experience goals would be a critical piece to understanding what choices are reasonable, what paths are and options are open, and that's a missing part. And starting as early as feasible, I mean, you could have kindergartners setting goals, I think, at a basic level, but at least as you're transitioning to a place where now you all of a sudden you have a formal record that's going to live with you, and it's going to determine a lot of your future, coming out of middle school and into high school, and certainly by the 10th grade, maybe too late. But students putting down their goals so that the administration and their teachers and their advisors and counselors have something to talk about in the first instance would be very, very helpful.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
Laura, you have an additional question? Can't hear you again.
When Mike talks about the visioning process, principles to guide Souhegan, vision for learning, Souhegan 2021 to 23 initiatives, is this a working document, and does the board have access to it?
So Laura, can I ask for a clarification?
Well, in part of your report, you're talking about the, you're meeting with the teachers to create a vision for learning and a visioning process currently.
Yeah, so one of the things you notice in the board report, based on some feedback I received from the board, in particular Pim, made a statement about kind of like, drawing back in, some of the outputs and outcomes of the goals for this year, and trying to align them a bit more kind of directly and appropriately with the strategic vision of the school. And there's some more work to be done on that. So I kind of, mentioned that in the board. As far as the visioning, and people who are been here a lot longer than me probably can understand this, that if you follow the history of Souhegan, they have a mission statement, they have a constitution, they have the Souhegan 6, we have a mastery learning, we have a portrait of graduate, we have a common, list of common principles. That's not clean. That's not easily communicated to teachers. It's not easily communicated to students. It's not easily communicated to parents and families. And so when we talk about our vision of work, and you hear us talk a little bit about the competency-based education and being that school, what we want to do is do some internal work to look at that and kind of cross-reference those things so we can more appropriately align to SAU 39 and the direction of that. But before we start to, work with students and families on what that experience looks like, we have to do some internal work. And I've mentioned to, some people in the building, there is a lot to navigate. It is a bit overwhelming for educators. And I think we can do some work to tighten and clean that up. And so that's what the process that and it's mentioned in the board that we're doing internally. And it will be a fluid process over the course of the spring and the summer, and then we hope to kind of see where we are at the SAU level, and I think we're nimble enough and we're flexible enough in our work that we can align ourselves with that. So right now the work's really preliminary, and I was updating the board on that because I think we have to do some work internally, and I'm fortunate that there's a number of people who are willing to do this work with us. It's the good work, it's the hard work, it's the work that we need to do at our school to make sure we can provide the best educational experience for students and families. So communicating what that experience looks like is important. So
you don't have anything in writing at this point, you're just having meetings to discuss what these items are?
We do. Yeah, we don't have anything public. We have our internal working documents, but we have nothing that I've shared with Christine or Adam at this point because it is something that we felt we wanted to do at Souhegan. Not that we can't share it with people, but that we just are working on that work to get ready to better align with SAU 39 and the strategic vision, and be able to communicate that educational experience to students and get them involved in the process. Right now, we can't expect students to understand all those things that I mentioned: portrait of a graduate, common principles, Souhegan 6, right? It needs to be tighter and cleaner.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Stephanie.
Yep, my last question. It made me think about something, Mike. So I'm excited to hear about this work. I think it's definitely is needed to tighten up, clean up, and get one message out there. I think that's a great idea. So when you say the faculty is working this spring, is it all the faculty? Or are you just using a subset? Are you just using that subset of that master's that's doing that competency-based cohort, or is everybody involved?
Right now, it has a handful of people kind of leading it that are doing that work. And then on April 21st, or so some of the work's been done with the coordinators, which are, not the CBE group, but the kind of teacher representatives, like the department head types. And then on April 21st, there will be an activity that's been scheduled for quite some time. So, staff meetings are hard to, schedule, right? Like they're coveted time, that hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot of different things you could use that for. We've scheduled April 21st, and I'm really looking forward to that meeting. Jeannie Sturgis and Ann Swift and Carl Benavides and the coordinators are kind of planning that session.
Nice.
So that's
Great,
where we're at.
thank
So,
you.
so everyone will be involved.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question on the principal's report for Mike? No? Okay, great. Thanks for that. How about the Title I program update? Let's move on to that. Stephanie, you have a question, concern?
Yes, hopefully quick question. Is this going to be fully grant funded, Christine, or are we going to need to use any potential unassigned fund balance to help fund this?
Fully grant funded. So we were able to roll over our grant funds from last year to this year. So we're confident it will cover the entire program.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's great. Laura, yes.
I was going to ask how many students are involved, are not meeting their metrics for math or English in the 9th and 10th grade?
We were just working on the eligibility spreadsheet today. I won't have that for a few more days, but in looking at overall class-wide data, we were able to determine that, the incoming 9th and 10th grade students, from the class-wide data, it appears that we would have more students eligible in 9th and 10th grade. We're also struggling a little bit to find teachers who are available and able to teach in our Title I program. So we're also looking at some creative ideas on how to build that program with some limited staffing support, and still working on how we might be able to pair it with our summer school program and come up with a plan to be able to really provide that other layer of support to students.
Thank you.
Steve, please. Go ahead.
Just clarification from CL, I should say. The special bonus this year. Am I correct in believing that all of our students are eligible to participate in this? Because everyone's Title I this year? Every Title I student this year?
We're still determining eligibility. I think if we were using a different funding source for that, if we were using our ESSER II funds, I believe it might be that we would be able to invite all students. We're looking at using our Title I funds, which are still restricted to students who are not meeting those grade level expectations. But again, we can use the funding that we have and service the neediest of those students, and we can certainly expand out the numbers. I think our challenge right now is also staffing to be able to expand out that program.
Great. John, you have a question for Christine?
Yeah, I think this maybe answered the question, but the Title I funding is only applied to students not meeting grade level or benchmark. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is not, that's a broader group of students than your students who are on formal IEPs or have more robust supports are included in Title I.
Correct. It is broader than just students who are on an IEP or 504. And often, since we run a summer Title I program, if students on an IEP or 504 are already being serviced through like an ESY program, they don't become our neediest students, and we have to service our neediest students.
Okay. And then, so to Steve's point, if somebody, I mean, notwithstanding the finding the teachers and the labor to implement it, I mean, if a student is demonstrably on grade level, they arguably wouldn't need this additional support, because despite all of the challenges this past year, they've somehow managed to blossom. And really what you're focusing on your eligibility determination is to see what is the question you're asking? What are the metrics to understand with fidelity how we understand whether a child is on grade level or not on grade level? Is that kind of where you are right now?
Yes, and Title I is meant to service students who are not meeting grade level expectations, yet it is up to the school and district to determine what your metrics are. And then once those students are determined, you must rank order all students in the entire school. So we don't just say, if you meet this criteria, you're in the program. We have to use multiple criteria, and in doing so, we actually have a rubric and have to rank order every student in the entire school. And then we serve the neediest of those students. So when we have additional funding or additional teachers to really be able to expand our program, we could be expanding out as far as our capacity allows, which could dip into the fringes of kids who are on the edge of maybe meeting or not meeting those grade level expectations.
Okay, so I think I understand. So it becomes a little gray when you have a student who is being assessed on half a dozen, let's say, competencies, and they're at the, between 2 and 3 somewhere. Some things are on grade level, but elements of that particular subject are below grade level. Well, now it's not clear. It's not totally below, but it's sort of below.
Mm-hmm.
So these are our students who would be in your gray zone.
Yes, and if funding allows, we're able to, go into that gray zone in a sense, as long as we're rank ordering and servicing the neediest of those students. We would be able to do that. Often summer school might pick up those students as well. So we do have our summer school program, and we do have our extended school year program for students who qualify who are on IEPs. So this program is really outside of those. Summer school looks specifically just at students who are not meeting all of the competencies for a course. And Title I is really looking holistically at multiple educational criteria to determine whether or not that student is comprehensively meeting those grade level expectations, and then serving the neediest of those once we've rank ordered.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty specific in federal regulations around that, so it's a little complicated.
Thanks, Christine. Laura, you have an additional question?
Yes, so the incoming 9th grade, so they're not even our students yet. They're really the middle school students, and we're having to give them tutoring before they're even our students yet.
So they have, they will be our students since they graduate from Amherst Middle School. We actually reached out to the Department of Education a few years ago to determine whose responsibility they were, and the Department of Education. They said, it's really up to us to make that determination, but we do have to be consistent with that. And we have always passed that student on to that next school. So for example, our current 4th grader at Clark Wilkins would actually be serviced at AMS. And the same thing with Mont Vernon. So we take those incoming students because more often than not, they need that little boost of that connection with a teacher that they're going to have in that school. They to be able to be in that school building is really supportive for those students who might be struggling. It really gives them that leg up. So we have done that because remember, we don't have to service our 12th grade students. They will have graduated. They're not our students anymore. So Souhegan is responsible for those for 4 grade levels and those incoming grade levels. And we've done that equitably across all of our schools to service our incoming students since it's a summer program.
Are you going by NEWA scores or teacher recommendations?
So we use multiple criteria. We definitely use NEWA scores. We use PSAT, SAT scores. We also use grades. We haven't, we do like an overall grade for students. So we've actually just pulled our Q3 class grades, course grades for students for that. We can use teacher recommendation. We found that that's a pretty arduous process for teachers to go through to make recommendations, and the objective criteria of the standardized tests, and then the grades are usually that right balance. We also look at attendance. So we do use multiple criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, you're on mute.
Thanks. Now I'm doing it. All right. Now I can't remember what the heck I just said. Well, thank you very much, Christine, for all of that great information and the clarification. So we'll move on. The next thing is the board goals discussion. So here we're just having kind of an initial discussion. One of the things that always pops into my mind when we start talking about board goals, I'm sure everybody gets the same emails from the NHSBA that I do. And, what do you see over the course of the last couple of months? Quite often, is probably every other week, is so they send out email, oh, has your board done something great? Do you want to be a school board of the year? Even though I don't think that's our sole purpose of what, to get something like that, to strive to implement goals that have an impact, that qualify, I think should be. So as we start to think about goals, we should really keep that in mind. How do we better the school? How can we, implement things that are truly make a difference, obviously in a positive way. And, they need to be smart, right? And everybody, pretty much everybody should have anyway heard of what SMART goals are. They're specific, measurable, attainable, obviously relevant, and time bound, right? So those are the types of goals that we should be thinking about. So I'll just leave it at that for the moment and see if anybody has any specific comments or questions right now. Adam, is it something that you wanted to guide us through a little bit, or not really sure what the discussion needs to be at this point, other than just starting to come up with some potential topics?
Yeah, I'm happy to, I'm taking notes in the Souhegan Trello board, and happy to do that and provide any comments that you guys would like along the way. But this is really a board level discussion for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree. Laura, yes.
I'll open up the discussion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I brought this up requesting more information 2 months ago in email, and I haven't gotten a response. And that was the students enrolled in dual enrollment, our metrics for that, how many students have the opportunity to receive college credit from their courses. One of our long-term strategic vision goals is to obtain more college credit, and I think we need to decide a baseline. Where are we at? And we have to quantify that, and it takes some work, but we can gather together the information.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I think we need to come up with, what does a SMART goal look like in those terms. So if you want to maybe start to kind of put some words down to what that may look like, we can certainly, because I have a feeling this is going to be an iterative process and something that will we really should be talking about every meeting anyway, and definitely in the next meeting as we start to solidify what those goals are. John?
Yeah, it's really hard to think of a board goal that is a SMART goal. I mean, because the goals are to have a great school system. A lot of the SMART goals there are really for administration to do. We wanted to retain more of our students who are whose parents delivering them to private schools or some other school other than Souhegan. That's a great outcome, but what are we doing as can we do as board members when a lot of that is driven by what the administration does? So I have a basic goal. I think there's some SMART components to it, which is to improve the internal communication of the board. I think that one of the problems that I've seen, and it's not unique to Souhegan, it's the same on Amherst when I was there, that and there's an inherent problem because we're all elected as individuals. We aren't a team in that sense. We come together once a month or as needed in an emergency situation to sort of pretend like we're a team, but we're really not. And there maybe are some ways we can leverage a collaborative space, which is what we're teaching our kids to do anyway. So it would be a nice modeling for them. So what are some things that might be SMART goals? So that we can sort of carry the water for each other and help administration help improve our schools. One is, I feel like the board chairs carry a lot of the water for the board. They go into 4 chairs meeting. There may be other meetings of which I am not even aware. That's a lot of burden, it seems. So why not leverage the power of 2 brains on a topic and have the vice chairs attend the meetings with the chair so that there's 2 people hearing the same information, so that if there's communications that need to go out after the meetings to the boards, one person could take it one time, the other person could take it another time. That if the chair is unavailable, that the vice chair can step in and is fully informed. And if the vice chair is out or can't make a meeting, then the secretary goes. And if the secretary can't, then another person appointed by the board. So that the goal being that there's always two ears, 2 brains, 2 points of view for the matters that are historically been reserved for only the board chair. That's one idea for a better board communication.
Oh,
The second one that I
it's a
have,
great idea.
yeah.
No, sorry, I'm just communicating. Yeah. So go ahead.
Appreciate that. A second one that I have, and I'm sensitive to the right to know laws and about meetings and serial meetings, and there's maybe some gray area there. I'd almost go out on a limb and say I would risk towing the line on that for this goal, which is to have some sort of small group, obviously no more than 3 people. There's no formal meeting here, but kind of a regular check-in type of a phone call, maybe once a week, to talk about what were your impressions of last meeting? What action items did you have in your notes? Do we get that information yet from the administration or whatever? And roll that around. So in any given week, it might be Pam and me and Steve, and another week it might be George and Laura and Christine, and on and on. And every week it's just a different mix, so that we can talk to each other, sort of off camera, candidly, in private, and offer ourselves an opportunity to deepen our understanding of the issue. So when we do come to a meeting like this, the public knows 2 things. One, that we've been working behind the scenes to try to understand what the best course of action to take. And 2, when we come to our meetings, we disclose all of that. We have a really solid agenda. We're well versed on the issues. We're not seeing things for the first time, which is frequently the case. And we can leverage the power of our group, as opposed to just always everyone individually doing all the work required to be a fully informed board member. So those are some concepts that would help our internal communications, and that would help us inform administration. That would help us ask better questions during meetings, and really show our community that we're taking this role very seriously, not just once or twice a month at a formal meeting.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Good point. So we'll figure out how we can work that into a good goal. I don't remember if it was Stephanie or Laura next. We'll go with Laura. I think she said Stephanie. Stephanie's saying Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
I think we need to consider our educational goals, where we rank as a school district and what kind of educational quality we're obtaining or for every student.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. Let's, I invite you to try to define that a little bit more into, you know, how the board can affect that. Having statistics only is one thing, but that's not a goal, you know, or it shouldn't be a goal. It's the goal should be, as you say, improving it. So how does the board affect that improvement? As you mentioned before, I think that, we hire as a SAU board, we hire the superintendent hires the staff, and staff accomplishes the goals. So, but we should look at something that we as a board can affect. I hear where you're going, Laura. Just kind of see what kind of boards you could put around that turn that into like an attainable, measurable goal. That'd be great. Stephanie?
How we rank in New Hampshire is measurable and attainable. Where are we now and where are we going to be next year?
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be.
Well,
as
yeah,
long as
but
we work to improve ourselves.
okay. I do hear what you're saying. Can you, why don't you submit that as a, write it up. Someone's got to write these up is what I'm saying. So as you come up with ideas, I'm talking to everybody now, come up with how you want those goals to be written out. And then we can discuss those probably at our next meeting and refine them as needed. But we have to start somewhere. So I would appreciate it if, everybody who's coming up with these board goal ideas to start to figure out what kind of wording you're going to put around that to turn it into something that we can act on. Okay, Stephanie.
So along the idea of communications, kind of John was talking, he was thinking internal. I'm also thinking a little bit of external communications. We're going to be looking at next science labs going in the budget. We're going to need to start communicating, I think, externally more to the community. When you look at how Amherst School Board writes a letter to the editor each month. Right now, I know because of the potential school building bond issue, they're reaching out to the community by mailers. I think we need to consider finding a way to maybe even us as a school board writing a letter to the editor each month so they understand what's going on within the Souhegan School Board.
No, I think it's a good idea. At one point, we do have a communication committee, kind of. It was Steve and Amy as the alternate. I don't know, Steve, if that's something that that committee would typically undertake.
So that's
Or is that a different?
So the school has a communications team, which is pretty much led by Amanda, and so that was sort of liaising with that, being the board liaison.
Okay, so it's a different, because I thought didn't one time we'd have a communication committee that did exactly what Stephanie's talking about?
We did, and then the school got very active, and then so it sort of withered on the school board side, and now COVID has sort of put a big dent in the ability of faculty members to participate in the communication committee as they used to do on the school side. So that's kind of withered a bit as well.
Yeah. So I understand where Stephanie's coming from. I think we maybe should think about reforming that committee. And we have our organizational meeting coming up after the election. We can certainly do that. I think it's a good idea. Usually it's a couple of, at least two people, probably with an alternate as well, that come up with the articles that would be submitted, to the papers, or electronically or otherwise. So it's a good idea though, Stephanie. So let me see, I've just jotted that quick note down. Okay. Did you have
Can I
something
just
else,
say a word
Stephanie?
about the committee? But I'm certainly not opposed to the committee studying anything. There's just to say, at least for a while, I'm not sure how they're doing it now on the Amherst School Board, but a letter to the editor was a task that was just a rotation more or less of a person assigned as a primary drafter for any given month, and then it would be a new person as the primary drafter in the subsequent month, and so on, which I thought was a really great way to empower the rest of the board members and engage them throughout the year. And it's not a whole lot, a couple of times a year to do that, to be a primary person, and then everyone would have an opportunity to put feedback in on the draft. It was a pretty good process, and it was outside of committee work, where you have a fixed number, the fixed people are all constantly doing that work on behalf of everyone else throughout the year. So just wanted to put that out there as food for thought as we improve our external communications.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. Sorry about my whining dog in the background. Stephanie, did you have another
That
one?
was
or-
Stephanie groaning. Just teasing. Just
Never.
teasing.
Yeah, actually, I do have one. I wonder if we should evaluate any changes that we've made during COVID to see if they're worth keeping.
Okay. Yes, I think that's good. A good idea.
Very generic.
Yeah, I don't know how that translates into a goal, but I think that's something that we should do. So again, maybe if you can formulate some wording around that, I think that'd be great.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea, and I know even as early in the process as last year's graduation, that spoke a couple of words, Adam and I, about certain things about that graduation that looked like they could, continue going forward no matter what kind of conditions we may be in. So anyway, so that's a good idea. Laura, do you have another topic or idea?
Progress toward a year of measurable growth for each student. What is Adam
Okay.
using for the metrics for that?
So is that different than your educational metrics that you were just talking about earlier?
The ranking in New Hampshire is based on our 11th grade scores for test data in March. And this is for each student where they have a year of growth each year. It's
Gotcha.
every grade, not just 11th grade.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I would like to sit down with Mike. I'd like to have the opportunity to discuss what I was envisioning for trying to quantify how well we're serving our graduates for college credits.
Is that a separate goal that you're talking about? Thinking
No,
about?
but I can have a better opportunity to sit down and say, this is what I was looking for and what data he has to support that formula.
Okay, and that goes towards your year of growth or towards your other goal?
No,
your metrics?
Adam for the
Or is that
strategic
completely
vision
different?
has been saying he's trying to get 50% of our graduates to have 2 years of college credit.
Mhm.
So we have to have a baseline to know, are we growing towards that?
Yep.
We need to measure it. It needs to be measurable.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anybody else with any thoughts on this at all at this point? There's a bunch of good ideas. Let's put some words around what that may look like and discuss it a little bit more detail at our next meeting. Is everybody good with that? Okay, great. Let's move on to the unassigned fund balance discussion. So I don't see Michelle here. Adam, are you going to lead this part of the discussion? Or? Okay.
Yes,
okay,
happy to,
great.
Mr. Chair. Yep.
Okay, take it away.
All right, so each year in the spring, we have a discussion starting in April, continuing in May, and then finalized in June about our unassigned fund balance. So this is on every agenda in April, then again in May, and then once again in June. This year is clearly very significant and unique because of what happened with COVID this past year and the expenses from last year that were carried over as a part of the governor's emergency orders, and lots of the funds that we received through the course of this year through federal funding. And so right now, as you noticed in the unassigned fund balance report, consent agenda item number 2, and then again, the follow-up item later on, number, I think it was 7 or 8, we have a significant amount of dollars that are available to us for the unassigned fund balance. This school board could choose to do nothing. And that's certainly an acceptable outcome. And if so, all those funds would be returned to taxpayers when the tax rate is set this coming fall. Or the school board could make a motion now, May or June, anytime prior to June 30, to do some projects with those funds. And so we've put together a list of potential year-end projects, which is included in your packet, and there's a link to a Google document also in that packet, which I can bring up as well. And these list some of the unassigned fund balance projects that are a potential for the board's consideration. In addition, earlier today, Roger provided an update thanks to a question by Laura that was very helpful about some things that have been done or not done so far. And so from that list of projects, there are some things that have been completed over the course of this past year as well. And so really the hope from this discussion is that the board does not need to make any final decisions tonight, because we'll be tracking the unassigned fund balance as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. But we wanted to start that discussion now in preparation for potentially making decisions in either May or in June. And so tonight, I'd really like to be able to answer any questions the board might have. I will share with you that Michelle had a personal event arise today, and Roger is actually meeting with our Board of Selectmen this evening, talking about the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee project. And so that's why you are stuck with me. But I'm happy to answer any questions I possibly can.
Great, thanks, Adam. So I'll start. One of the items that I see, there's 2 items that are lined off that are on the project list. Obviously, the annex science classroom renovations. We talked about that, about putting that into a separate warrant article next year. So I get that. The security entrance is also lined out. Oh, okay. Now I'm reminded as I reread this. So that we had no function code in this year's budget, so therefore we cannot expend any funds in that category. That's correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. That clarifies that. So then, and the rest of these are in priority order. So that's very helpful. Does anybody have any particular questions right at this point in time for Adam? Laura.
I'm a little confused. Didn't last time when we discussed the USB, we specifically requested to have $1 put in the placeholder so that we could do construction?
Well, it's, sorry, I'm
Last
glad.
year.
Yeah, you did for FY22. And so the budget that'll be voted on in June has that. But the FY21 budget, about which we're discussing, does not have that. So we did make that correction for the future, but we are not able to enjoy the fruits of that change quite yet.
Okay. All right. That's unfortunate.
Okay. Stephanie?
Adam, do you have any idea how comfortable Michelle is with that $343,000 number with the food service in there?
Yeah, so we are pretty comfortable. I think Stephanie, and you know in particular, some of the finance staff is very conservative in their work. And so we're very careful and meticulous about, we would not want to present a number that we weren't not only comfortable with, but thought was likely to grow as we get closer to the end of the year. So we're very comfortable.
Okay. Are any of the things on this project list dire necessities? Like we're afraid it has to be done. It's one of those surprises that we didn't plan for, but oh boy, it needs done.
There's nothing that rises to the level of what I would call an emergency. When we think about, and a great example of that is the road sign. We don't have to have a sign on the road at all, but man, it really doesn't make us look like a very professional organization with a sign that's that old and that beat up. So we don't have anything on here that is mission critical, because if we did, we would have already brought it forward to you and said we had to do it already. So it's all things that are very solid uses of taxpayer dollars, meaning they all have a purpose that is clearly aligned with the betterment of the school, but nothing that is a critical repair that has to be done.
Okay.
The bold type versus non-bold, is there a significance to the bold type?
I'll just jump in. There is Michelle's letter at the last page of the agenda packet talks about the 4 projects that bolded are
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I
suggested
see
top priorities.
Yeah, I see it now, which is funny. Well, the reason why I ask is because the locker rooms are not folded, but yet they're within that grouping. Okay. And John, yeah, did you have a separate question other than straightening me out?
Yeah, I don't think I mean, I think I know the answer to this, which is we don't know yet. But I mean, according to our governor, New Hampshire will enjoy quite a substantial one-time influx of federal money. Is this? I know this discussion is supposedly about the unreserved fund balance, but that's an interesting choice we're going to have to make some point soon. I'm not sure. I imagine that stuff is getting sorted out right now. And I guess the question is to Adam is, does he know where that stands currently, or what the projected certainty date will be?
Yeah, there's some things we know about ESSER 3, as it's called, and some things we don't. One thing we know is that we've been told to anticipate getting 2.3 times the amount of money we receive for ESSER 2. Apparently that's the funding formula, and we've not seen it in writing to my knowledge, but we've been told a couple of times by different folks at the DOE 2.3 times the amount of ESSER 2. And our ESSER 2 amount was in the 6-figure range. So there's real money coming our way from ESSER 3. We also know that the time frame for ESSER 3 is a lot longer, meaning I think it doesn't have to be expended right away, and there's a longer timeline with that. But Michelle really is the expert with those things, and that's about the extent of my knowledge.
Okay. I don't see ESSER 2 on our. Well, I guess it's not I mean, is it part of an unassigned fund balance? As it says COVID funding, there's a whole block in there. Is there ESSER money, or if it's not in this current, could we sort of see where that is? Because
yeah, so
sorry, let me just
it is listed there as under the American Rescue Plan Act, which is listed as to be determined. There's a notation there on page 28 that says it's anticipated to be $127,000.
Oh, ESSER 3
Correct.
Anticipate 127. Oh,
that's right.
And where was ESSER 2 on here?
ESSER 2 is from the CRRSA Act.
Okay, I see it. Okay,
Yeah, it's in the COVID funding block.
So I believe
57. Oh,
54,000 times 2.3 probably comes to
figures at
127,000.
127. Okay, all right. Yeah, okay.
Right,
What are
while
the
you're saying- while-
restrictions on using that money?
Well, as with every federal grant, it has to supplement, not supplant. So meaning it can't be, we can't take something we would have done anyway and just pay for it. It has to be somewhat related to the impact of COVID-19, including the educational impacts for kids. That's why like our Title I program is a perfect fit for that. And so, but as with most large federal legislation, the regulations are still being written. And so we don't fully know all of the regulations that will be associated with it yet. But we know in general, it's going to be things that are directly related to the impact of COVID-19.
Okay, Steve has been patiently waiting. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, this is just me putting my old man historian hat on, trying to impress on the board members who will be here long after I'm gone. The tradition of spending the unexpended fund balance, which has been true, I think, maybe except for last year, every year that I've been on the board. So the taxpayers and voters have sort of accepted this tradition. So we encourage the board to think along those ways. There's a way that is acceptable to our funders. Typically, the board has tried to take the unexpended expenses, revenue overspend. But so the general guideline, and it's been a broad band, the general guideline is try to send about 50% back to taxpayers to reduce their tax bill in December, and try to spend no more than 50% on projects. And the projects are, as Adam sort of described earlier, they're not, oh my God, we're going to die things, because we've done them already. But they tend to be projects that we're going to have to spend money on soon anyway, in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, the poor road sign, my favorite pet project on this list, which got hit by a car, truck, or other large moving object. It's not something that we need to fix, but we would probably budget to fix it next year anyway, because it is 3 steps closer to falling down than it was before. It was pretty much along the way already before. So it's things that are worthy in the sense of it's not just spending money for the sake of spending money. It's something that's going to give us a long return. You know, we got 20 years out of the last sign up, 20 years out of the next one. But also things that have cropped up during the year that would have put in the budget if we'd known 18 months beforehand they would crop up. They cropped up long after the budget got passed. So, so maybe auditorium curtains is probably something. I don't know the state of curtains, but I imagine that they are. They're probably at a point now where they weren't when we originally wrote this year's budget. So it's things that we wish we could have fixed earlier but haven't. And a particularly effective way to think about it is frequently it's things that we talked about putting in this year's budget that didn't make the cut. And now that so there's been some thought about it. It was like, you know, how we cut things to the budget to try and make it as lean as possible. So it's something that we would have done if we had an infinite purse, but didn't. And now we have a little extra money in the purse. Maybe now's the time to do it. So think of it in those terms. And I think I don't know the details of all of this, but I think all of these fall into that category. And oh yeah, I really support doing this.
So I'm not sure about everybody else there. It was a little bit difficult to understand everything that you were saying, Steve. And there was some microphone issues or something going on. But I got the gist, and I think everybody else probably did as well. In essence,
I was having trouble as well. Could you maybe just give a high level summary of what Steve was saying?
Yeah, as I was just about to say. So I'll summarize what he said by basically saying that half of the expense, the amount that's in the expense line is something, or I don't know, it was half of that or half of the total, is something that we typically try to get back to the taxpayers. So that kind of limits us, I shouldn't say limits, that's a target for us to spend up to, not more than, I should say. We don't necessarily have to spend every penny up to that 50% level. So that's what my takeaway from that, Steve.
Yeah,
So is that about right?
It's a guideline. So,
Yeah. But was it of the expense line or
of the
was it
expense
of-
line, because the
okay.
revenue line all goes back to the taxpayers already.
Yeah, okay, that's what I figured, so I wasn't sure. So thanks for that clarification. I did do some quick math a little bit ago. The first 5 items on there adds up to $165,000. That's just under half of that amount. Now granted, $75,000 of that is in our current budget recommendation that we are trying to get passed. Should that be defeated, the idea was that we would go and utilize some of these funds for that. If we add in the auditorium curtains beyond, so first the top 6, that's 180,000. We're slightly over half at that point. So again, this is a discussion for now. I don't think we need to make any decisions on it because we don't know where we're going to be relative to the lockers upgrade. But we can certainly have in our minds that whether or not we want to move forward with any of these other ones. Laura, you have a concern or question?
I have a couple things. One, there's an article for 75,000. And it's my understanding, well, if that passes for the 75,000 going to the turf field, if that passes, does it remove from the 343?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, sorry. That's absolutely correct. It's 85,000, I think, but yes.
Okay. 85. Well, we have a warrant article that would reduce this amount already.
Yeah, that's a good
Wanted
point.
to know, when will you know, Adam, about the possible 127,000, and what do you propose with that money? What type of COVID do you expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're not sure when we're going to know, and until we do, we don't want to make any firm plans. But those would be discussions we would want to have with the board as well, because we wouldn't want to make those decisions outside of the discussion with you folks. And so I'm hoping that our May meeting will have an update.
Pam, I also wanted to praise Roger and Adam for accomplishing so much off of what were possibilities last year. That was pretty substantial, had 12 or 13 items on it, and almost all of them are completed.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think they're both worthy of that compliment. And
I would disagree. I appreciate the appreciation, but I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Roger deserves all of that credit. So
yeah, but you hired Roger, so there you go.
Fair enough.
Anyway, but no, it was a tremendous amount of work, and I also appreciate that. I did ask a question earlier today, rather, via email to see if those could be highlighted somehow for us to turn into a slide for our deliberative, which is coming up very soon. And I have some things to say about that, but once we're done with this. Anybody else have any questions, concerns, comments? Steve, your hand's still up for another comment? Okay. John, just put your hand up. Yes.
Yeah, just as a general rule, it makes me really uncomfortable to look at this unexpended funds, and barring emergency, like electrical transformer exploding or some complete equipment failure, for us to just decide ad hoc. I would like, maybe in future, it's not for now, but in future, could we have a warrant article to fund stuff out of surplus that recognizes the guideline that Steve was, or something akin to it, you know, to raise up to half or 40% or put some number, and for these very things, so taxpayers can say, like, yes, we want you to make decisions on these, and make our, you know, raise it out of surplus. We don't know what that number is with precision, but we can raise a percentage of it on an ongoing basis and start putting away money that, with taxpayer approval, and feel really confident in picking off a list like this going forward. So I just wanted to make that comment, that I understand the situation, but it just doesn't sit totally well with me.
Yep, thanks for that, John. I struggle with it every year myself, so I hear where you're coming from. Yeah. I don't know if that's something that we could do. I would have to defer to the administration to see if that's something that even is allowed to happen. Yeah, I don't know how you would structure a warrant article for that.
Well, John, and help me if I'm misunderstanding, but what you're describing is almost exactly what we have with our capital maintenance, capital reserve fund, where we have funds set aside that we've set aside in the past, and there's several $100,000 sitting there just for those specific types of emergencies. We never like to hit it unless we have to, but I remember, I think 4 years ago, we did it for a boiler at Souhegan, where we didn't have the funds at the end of the year. So we do have that. And I think it reached a level about 2 years ago where we felt like we didn't need to keep adding to it because we had enough set aside. And I forget the number off the top of my head, but we had enough set aside where we felt like that would cover anything that would be a major failure that wouldn't be covered by insurance, you know. So I think we have just that structure already in place.
Oh, okay, that's great. I would argue that a fund like that should be funded in perpetuity, and if it doesn't need to be used for a long period of time, that's great. It can earn some interest, and we can leverage that, because what we know is eventually things will happen. In certain expense, very expensive things will happen. I mean, if this was a program that had started and was done consistently since 1992, I can't even imagine how many millions of dollars would be available to do real projects that doesn't really cost anybody anything in today. And we just keep putting into it. Something like that would make decisions like this very easy, and we just don't have that on a recurring basis. So going forward, I would argue strenuously that we should always fund a fund like that for these very things that we know will come. The next year it won't be these things; it'll be some other things, and 5 years later it'll be yet some more things. Right? We have a turf field coming due in 5 years. There's other things, pavement, whatnot. So there's always going to be some need to do stuff like this.
John, I agree. And if I could add to that, the other mechanism that exists that's just come available to school districts in the last 5 or maybe 7 years is we do have the ability to hold contingency funds, which are at the end of the year, voters can approve once that in perpetuity we can set aside, and I believe it's 2.5% of our local assessment that can be set aside as contingency. Those funds cannot be spent without permission after a public hearing of the board, and I believe permission by the DOE when an emergency occurs, or by voter approval. Voters can also approve to expend those funds from the contingency. Towns have had that ability forever, and if you look closely at the Amherst side of things, there's actually several $1 million sitting there. that the selectmen have at their disposal at tax rate setting time to adjust the tax rate and to help level off the tax rate. It's never been available to schools until recently because towns don't have guaranteed income, but we do. As a school district, if the towns don't have the tax revenue to give to us, they're actually required to borrow it and pay interest on whatever they had to borrow to give it to us. So our revenue's always been guaranteed, which many people believe obviates the need for us to have that kind of contingency fund. But that exists as well. But going one step further, the way we've kind of structured things over my time here is we try to budget for preventative maintenance in our budgets for things that are just oil changes and belts changed and all that kind of stuff. And then we have this 20-year capital needs assessment for the major things that we need to replace in our schools. And we're funding that through a separate warrant article process, through a capital reserve fund. And then we also have the emergency capital reserve fund for things that we can't predict or can't project breaking. And so personally, I think that's a pretty good set of plans that we have in place. What the board has to weigh is how much taxpayer dollars do you want to keep from taxpayers, right? That's the age-old question, is how much do you want to keep from offsetting the next year's tax rate? Because eventually people start to say, wait a minute, why are you hoarding all of those funds when, what's your plan? Well, we have a plan. We've got a plan for what we need to do each year for the next 20 years. We've got an emergency fund for emergencies that come up, and we've got a preventative maintenance plan budgeted in our budget. So from the board's perspective, you really have to wrestle with how much more would you want to hold on to. That was a little long-winded, but thank you for letting me explain my perspective.
You're welcome, and I appreciate it very much. And I'm just we have what was the JFAC number for the big build out at Souhegan? How many millions? 3 point something. So there's projects to be done that, redoing the HVAC system to make the ventilation proper. Well, that's a great use of COVID funding, by the way, but that's a multi-million-dollar project because everything's buried in the walls and buried in the ceiling. You have to rip out other utilities just to get to the ventilation systems. Boy, where do the fundings that you just cited, is that, now I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul either. We have a 20-year capital maintenance fund that has been scheduled to be contributed to so we can hit all those items, and replacing the HVAC system is not on that list. So where does a project like a Souhegan 2.0 that's multiple millions of dollars get funded? I just don't feel like our taxpayers are going to go for multi-million-dollar projects when they're feeling like they're taxed out. Our default budget increases so much every year through no acts of our own, by factors beyond our control, that we're talking about proposals of a few $100,000 and we're agonizing over those. I mean, boy, it's not a lot of room. So my thinking is, well, we have projects in the future that are like Souhegan 2.0, because in 10 years, you know what? It's going to be Souhegan 3.0. There's going to be some other things that are going to be important to do, and there are probably some several $1 million. So how do we chip away at that over in a reasonable manner over a long period of time? So when we want to do a major change to modernize for energy efficiency and make that investment that will clearly have a return, how do we fund it? And right now, I don't see any reasonable ways to draw from existing resources to fund projects like that, other than nipping away at the heels on these expenses that should probably really go back to the taxpayers, barring an emergency.
Thanks, John. Steve, you have a question or comment?
Comment. How do I sound? Apparently I didn't sound well last time. Oh,
You sound good
thank you.
now.
Okay. Headphone up, headphone down. That's the secret. So a long response to John's comment, starting with taxpayers don't like to give boards, school boards or select boards, slush funds. They absolutely hate doing that. So we have 3 carefully crafted emergency capital reserve funds that have, and I had a finger in the creation of all 3 of them. The first one was for special education, unanticipated special education expenses. And we asked the taxpayers for funding for that for a couple of years when we set it up. And then we had what we thought was an adequate balance in there. And the trustees of the trust funds have been growing it ever since without us ever having to go to the taxpayers again. So it's a pretty hefty balance right now. And very little of that came from the taxpayers. But it's there when we need it. We all know the risk to the budget of unanticipated special education costs when someone moves into town. So we've covered that large exposure at very little cost to the taxpayers. The second one was the unanticipated retirement benefits fund. When someone retires from Souhegan or any school district, really, they get a payout that's negotiated. That's it's not, but we can call it the exit bonus, and it's some fraction of their annual salary, not a large fraction, but some fraction. And if a bunch of people decided to retire at the last minute, so at the end of our school year, at the end of our budget year, and we had not budgeted for that retirement in advance, we could be hit with a large expense that we had no money to pay for because we'd spent all the money throughout the year on the regular stuff. So we have a small cushion in trust fund for that expense. Again, we got money from the taxpayers for 2 or 3 years to just build it up to a reasonable amount, that kind of the worst we could imagine case scenario, not the worst ever case scenario, but the worst we could imagine. And we haven't asked the taxpayers for that money to fund that ever since. So that's just sitting there should we ever need it. It's a small amount, but it's enough to make us feel comfortable. And the third one is this maintenance fund, which over the years, we would grow it by taking some amount, typically it was $65,000 from the unexpended fund balance, with the taxpayers' permission and a warrant article every year. And we would grow it up to some amount. In the old days, it was like $100,000, which we felt was enough money. And then we would only use it for emergencies. And if we spent it, we would refill it again. In the last 3 years or 4 years, we've been also flowing the capital repair program through that same fund. So it has a larger balance, but some of that is to level out the tax expense of our anticipated capital repairs, as Mount Vernon and Amherst School District are doing as well. But there's also a balance in there that's still not for those planned future expenditures. It's really emergency money. It's probably, I don't know, but let's say it's probably still $100,000 that's in there that is available for emergencies if a real emergency came up, like the boiler from a few years ago in the annex, like the rooftop unit on the main building that was a few years before that. Big dollar amounts. So Adam spoke about 2 funds, but in fact it is a single fund and the dollars are commingled. What we put in for our annual planned capital repairs plus the emergency amount. And if we ever went in there for an emergency, we would have to top up the emergency portion of that, but we haven't. And the first 2 funds I spoke about, the board just could expend money from those when the specific emergencies they're set up for come up. For the emergency maintenance fund, there's a process where there's a separate committee that has to meet and recommend to the board the expenditure before the board can expend it. So it's more tightly controlled because it's a little more slushy. It could be anything around the facility. So we have a second layer of oversight between the board and the checkbook, so the taxpayers will feel comfortable that we're not spending willy-nilly, and that's worked very well for us. So accumulating money in yet another fund for some big future thing it's possible, but I just don't see the taxpayers going for it because they never do in any town, anywhere.
Thanks, Steve. Stephanie, you have another question or comment?
Yeah, hopefully it's not too long. So I just went back and looked at the list that Amy provided at the public hearing for things that Roger has built in for next year, that warrant article to help fund that capital maintenance fund that Steve was just talking about. I noticed in there that there is some sort of paving for $71,000. I don't know if it's the same paving as that's on this list. That's the 100,000. I noticed that there was a exterior wall brick repair in there for 10,000. This says something about repair block on building 75. I don't know if these are some of the same things and something's changed. All right, I just want to make sure we're not duplicating things that we're looking for in the warrant article.
That's a good point. Adam, you expand on that?
I can speak to paving, going all the way back to the Gale report, which I believe was done in 2005, maybe 2004. It was a 10-year plan. The very last thing was to do not paving the entire Souhegan lot, but a good portion of it. And that warrant article actually failed. So Roger went and got a quote for what it would cost in today's dollars to do some of that paving. And when he put the $100,000 on this list, he didn't know how much of the parking lot needed to be redone as a part of the Gale report. And clearly he underestimated a little bit, because the one quote we got was about $1.2 million for that paving work. So that's not going to happen. So there's no duplication. It's really that there's about $1.2 million worth of paving that has to be done at some point in the future. It doesn't have to be done right away.
So this $100,000 that's in this list then is the same thing, but wouldn't really do anything. I guess that's what I'm trying.
You've got it exactly right.
Gotcha.
I'll just jump in without raising my hand. The Gale report paving was broken into 3 segments. So it was 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We got 2/3 done. Then the third failed, and there was always something more important to put in the warrant, and we never went back to it. But by now, the first third is old again.
Okay.
Yeah, to my point, all of that. And there's nowhere is there 1.2 million to cover it.
No. Laura, you have another question?
I just wanted to, it was pointed out to me the closeness of the election with us having to vote on the unassigned fund balance. And I'd like to wait and vote until after the election so we can get feedback from the voters for a better feel of, did the budget pass? Did the warrant articles pass? And
Yeah, I think that's the intent, right? We're not going to say move forward with anything today because the budget affects some of the things on this list. So I think this was just to have discussion to see where we're at. Everybody makes good points, and then but we make our final, give the final go ahead or not, but in June after the election. I'm not stating that out of turn, am I, Adam? Okay.
I think you have it.
Great.
Oh,
Okay.
I think, could I just say, yeah, consent item number 3, page 13 in the agenda packet has the current balance of all those 3 funds. So
yeah,
if anyone wants to see what the precise numbers are.
It's also on the Trello board.
And that's a recurring consent item, consent agenda item, the status of those funds.
Okay, so we've had our discussion, and I'm sure we'll continue that. No, we may not continue to have it in May, but we'll definitely talk about it again in June. Okay, speaking of May, the next thing we have is for our board specifically is a deliberative session on May 3rd. That's 3 weeks from today. So there's still, I know in the deliberative slides, there's still some open actions that I need some help with from staff members. So I know that most of the financial stuff has been taken care of. There's still some open questions for Christine, for Roger, and Mike. So if you guys can take a look at the slides. Michelle put it on Google Drive as well. So if you can do that, that would be helpful. I'd like to get that buttoned up well before 3 weeks from now, preferably. And what else? I think that's it. We have actually one more public comment session. So we have a limited number of public still in attendance, but I will certainly be happy to open the floor to anybody who has a question or comment that they'd like to address to the board. No, okay, I think we're good. So other than that, I think we have non-public this evening, Adam.
I think we're all set, Mr. Chairman. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We do have a non-public. Yes, it'll be brief.
Okay, and so in that case, I will entertain a motion to go into non-public.
I'll make a motion to go in non-public.
Thank you, Stephanie. Do I have a second?
I'll second if someone will tell me a letter.
Yes.
Yes.
C.
C. I'll second the motion.
So it's RSA 91A:3, section 2, subsection C. Okay.
Get that, John?
Yeah.
So we'll do roll call vote. Steve,
Yes.
John,
Glover, yes.
Stephanie,
Run, yes.
Christine P,
Peters, yes.
Laura,
Yes.
and Gronster, yes. Okay. The regular session is temporary.